while Charles and our two esteemed congressmen make their way to the stage, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge and to recognize our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is the Port of Houston Authority. I want to give them a big hand and tell them thank you for all that they do. So thank you again to the Port of Houston Authority. As well as all of our sponsors you'll see on your program and on the signage, and also again say thank you and recognize all of our booth sponsors here today. During the breaks, please do take time to visit those folks and get to know them a little bit better. And with that, I'll turn it over to our MC, Charles Montgomery.
Thank you, Chad. I failed to introduce myself earlier this morning because I didn't want anybody to hunt me down about the chairs and the tables and the food and stuff. But now that you've been fed and you're seated, my name is Charles Montgomery. I represent the International Longshoremen's Association of Harris County and vicinity. We're the guys and gals that help the port deliver the goods, if you've seen that commercial. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be part of the Economic Alliance Port region. And I think all of you are too, because it shows by how many people are in the room. This is an exciting opportunity for me. This is an exciting opportunity for you, the 5th anniversary of this type of conference being held. We're all here, whether we move cargo by bulk or by wooden box. We're all here because we're all attached in this business by the water. If you look around the room, all the exhibitors have something to do with our direct industries, mine or yours. So it's going to be a great conference. There's going to be some terrific opportunities here to network. There's going to be some terrific opportunities to connect in business. As we go through the day, if you have space left at your table, there's a green card at your table. If there's some chairs open, please put that green card on the top of the marquee where someone can see it. That way they may be able to come in and sit down at your table and join you, and it could be that next big business deal that sits down at your table. Both of our speakers represent the petrochemical area of Texas, which is one of the reasons we're here today. Congressman Gene Green represents the 29th District and a major portion of our Houston ship channel. He sits on the following committees: the House Committee for Energy and Commerce, and is a member of the Subcommittee on Energy and Power. A couple of things I think that are very important to everybody at every table. Also, Congressman Randy Weber represents Texas's 14th District, and that's all ports along the Texas coast from Lake Jackson to Port Arthur. He sits on the following committees: Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa, 2 booming locations for us, one on booming and one coming. Also the Subcommittee on Energy he sits on. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the podium and to the stage our United States Congressmen Gene Green and Randy Weber.
Just wanted to find out who goes first. One, it's good to be back here, and it is a great crowd today. Chad, you and your staff have done a great job over the years. My name is Gene Green, and I represent, thank goodness I only represent part of one port. I was trying to get Randy. I said, Randy, how many ports do you represent? And I just represent part of the Port of Houston, whereas Randy has 5 ports. And like I said, I'm lucky I only have to work on one port. But I represent, over the years, don't get used to our lines, they're still under challenge, and the court's looking at them again, anywhere from the Fred Hartman Bridge all the way back to past the Turning Basin. Now it's just the Bellway 8 Bridge back. But since I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I spent at least most of my career working on energy legislation, and because of what we have in our Houston area. The mayor was correct that we have the largest petrochemical complex in the country along the Port of Houston, including a great deal of it in Pasadena. And that's our job creations, that's our economic base, and that's why I wanted to be on Energy and Commerce Committee. I'm going to talk a couple of minutes on the Port of Houston, the Houston Ship Channel, and then energy development, because that's something, like I said, I work on every day. Maritime on the Port of Houston, and this affects all our ports, we've had an issue for many years, and I've talked about it before. Our shippers pay a harbor maintenance fee that was supposed to go to fund our port dredging projects. The problem is, unlike our highway trust fund, that every dime we spend on our gas tax goes into public transportation, either streets or roads or public transportation. The harbor maintenance fee goes into the general revenue. Now, it's not supposed to be appropriated to anything else except harbor maintenance, but our Appropriations Committee, and this is both a bipartisan problem, they like to leave that there as a compensating balance. And over the years, the Port of Houston can justify needing about $60 to $70 million a year just for maintenance dredging. We generate about $120 million from the harbor maintenance fee. And we typically get back 30 this year on the president's budget, and what we're doing through the House, hopefully we get 31 million, so we get less than half of what we need. But we passed a bill earlier this year, the Water Resources Development Act, called WRDA, and that set up a new paradigm for using that harbor maintenance fees. Now, I wanted to be able to earmark it that if you generate it, you need to get at least half of your money back. And the rest of it would go to the Corps of Engineers, and on a cost-benefit basis, every port would put their projects up, and typically the Port of Houston, cost-benefit analysis, you know what we have along the sides of the channel, we overwhelm most other ports with cost-benefit, so we would win that. But that isn't what the committee, the Transportation Committee, did. Over the next number of years, by 2025, every dime of that harbor maintenance fee will go to the Corps of Engineers budget. We didn't get the set-asides for the ports who generated like I wanted, but it'll go to the Corps, so we will end up fighting through the appropriations process, getting the Corps to fund our projects. Now, that is a big win, because that's been a problem my whole career in Congress about getting that money back to folks who generate it. By 2025, 100% of that revenue, again, will be collected, will be spent on maintenance and dredging. We've struggled with the appropriations process because energy and water, like I said, typically we'll get anywhere from 28 to 31 million for maintenance every year. Now, during the 90s, when we did the deepening and widening to 45-foot, we were getting $75 and $80 million a year because we were dredging down deeper. And we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to go to 50 feet, particularly to Barber's Cut and Bayport, but we haven't gotten there yet. We need to do that from the port and be competitive with all the other ports along the Gulf Coast and even the South Atlantic. But our problem this year, we passed an energy and water bill. The appropriators didn't recognize the change in the law. So on a very bipartisan basis on the floor of the House, we amended the energy and water bill. And we have a real active ports caucus. Congressman Ted Poe's our Republican counterpart, and Congressman Janice Hahn, who represents L.A. Long Beach Port, is the two co-chairs, a Democrat. And our ports caucus got together, and we amended the appropriations bill to make sure they would meet what the law actually says. And we won that fairly overwhelmingly. And now we have to make sure the Senate does that, because our problem with our appropriations process in the House, it's been broken for a number of years. We have to pass 11 appropriations bills. We passed, I think, 6 or 7 of them. And the Senate hasn't passed any of them. So here we are, 1st of September. October is our new federal year. When we go back next week, we will end up having one vote on a continuing resolution. Now, what we fought and earned in the energy and water appropriations bill can be taken away from us by that one vote, unless we all work together, both in the Senate and the House. And I hope our senators from Texas is working on that, because it's not just for the Port of Houston. It's for every port from Beaumont, Port Arthur to Brownsville, Texas. And that's important because every one of those ports have projects that need to be funded by the federal government along with local match that we have. So that's something that will come up pretty soon. The deepening and widening, like I said, the 50-foot in the Bayport and Barber's Cut is something we need to do to be competitive with the Panama Canal. And that's something we need to continue to work on. And I know the port's working on that. Now let me talk about energy. You know, I was a state senator and represented most of the East Harris County area, and now in Congress over the last number of years. And I have, you know, being a native Houstonian, I've never seen our economy as good as this. Some of y'all remember that in the 1970s, we thought, you know, we were in heaven. And then in the 80s, we had a depression. Now, the rest of the country didn't know it, but Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma, and Alaska, we were in a depression with $8 a barrel oil. And so we had see-through office buildings, lots of unemployment, shutting down of some of our plants. But now we see so much expansion, so much on the drawing board, we cannot get enough skilled employees to build those facilities. And so that's why I want to thank San Jacinto College, but also from Baytown Lee College, and historically has partnered with industry. And a couple of weeks ago, we had the Department of Labor Secretary here at the Central Campus at San Jac. And he was impressed by having the industry standing there and saying, we're not teaching these students last generation technology. We're teaching them something they can go out right now and get a job at Shell, ConocoPhillips, Lyondell, some of those facilities. And I know in Baytown, Lee College does the same thing with Exxon and industry over there. And so, but Secretary of Labor said, you know, we used to do job training. We would train and then pray. We trained students, but we prayed that they would find a job. That's not what we can afford to do today, and the industry can't afford it either. So we need to make sure that technology they're learning at San Jac and all our community colleges, and Houston Community College is trying to get into it. But we know San Jac and Lee have done it, at least for the years I've been in office, so they have a good experience in it. But our issue now, because of the success in Eagle Ford and the rediscovery of what's happening in the Permian Basin, we actually have more crude oil and more natural gas than we know what to do with. And so the House passed legislation that will allow for a reasonable exporting of some of that natural gas. Now, we worried, you know, in 2005, we thought we were going to have to bring in natural gas to support our chemical industry, but now those same facilities are now turning around and trying to export it. Cheniere on the Sabine side, Exxon and Qatar on the Sabine side, on the Texas side. Of course, I know Freeport already has a permit. And my joke is, if you have a 5-foot ditch that reaches the Gulf of Mexico, you're applying for a natural gas export permit. Now, they're not going to have them. We're going to get most of them in Texas, Louisiana, but it is a bureaucracy problem. Now, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission typically takes 12 to 18 months, does most of the environmental work, most of the studies on it. Department of Energy responsibility is only to see that it's in our national interest. Now, we've had some problems with the Department of Energy and the regulatory delay. Some of those permits have been up there for 2 years. And the House passed legislation I was co-sponsor of that passed fairly overwhelming to give the Department of Energy some guidelines on what they do. It's our national interest to export LNG to countries that are our friends. Now, admittedly, I don't want to export it to Syria. I don't know if they need it, but I don't want to send it to our enemies. But I do know that we want to sell it to our friends and not just our free trading partners. We don't have a free trading agreement in Europe, but believe me, they would love to import our natural gas instead of bringing it from Russia. And we know the geopolitical problems they have now. So we're going to do that, but I use it, I like Bluebell ice cream, native Texan, and I use the Bluebell commercial. We eat all we can and we sell the rest. I'm going to use all we can of the natural gas and we're going to sell the rest to somebody else so we can keep those folks drilling out in the field. And that's what's important. So we'll see that. Now, there are other issues come up about oil exports, and there are some examples now of some of our ports exporting condensate. Since 1973 or 75, since the Arab embargo, we've had a prohibition against exporting oil. There are some exceptions over the last 40 years, and that will and that law is still in place, and those Department of Energy will approve those as we go. But Congress needs to look at that. Let me talk about my last thing, in East Harris County industrial expansion. It goes with the job training. Every plant, from literally Rhodia down in Manchester, this is the first chemical plant in East Harris County, I guess, all the way out to LaPorte and all down up the coast, even to Bayport. We're seeing expansions of almost every plant because of low-price natural gas. And I don't want to mess up the goose that's laying the golden egg. So that's why we need to balance our exports with what we can use here. And that's what our intent with that H.R. 6 is supposed to do. The last thing I want to talk about, the House also passed a bill. I've supported the Keystone Pipeline. I'm a native Houstonian. I've never not lived in a neighborhood on a pipeline easement. And so pipelines are the safest way to move product. particularly crude oil, as we found out some of the tragedies in the northern part of our country in Canada. The lack of a permit for Keystone is politics. It is all wrong. And so the House passed another bill, H.R. 3301, that the chair of our Energy and Commerce Committee and myself are co-sponsors, that would finally set cross-border pipeline regulations. Our regulations between Canada and Mexico and the United States the last 5 presidents have done it by executive order. If you're going to build a pipeline, you need more something than who's president. You need something in the law. And so the House passed some legislation. And it's not about Keystone. Keystone, if you have a pipeline application, you'd have to start over and refile if this law is passed. But it's about what may happen in our energy industry, not just what's happening today. We now send natural gas to Mexico from Texas. We brought natural gas from Mexico over the years. Northern Mexico does not have the infrastructure for their natural gas. They have a lot of potential. Eagle Ford goes south of the Rio Grande too. But now we're selling natural gas to Mexico. Once they get their infrastructure and everything put together, 20 years from now, if Eagle Ford's still not successful, we may be buying natural gas from Mexico to support our chemical industry and our energy, electricity, and maybe even our LNG or CNG cars. So we need to have something standardized in the law so investors will know what the law is and what they have to do to be able to have these permits, whether it's crude oil, whether it's natural gas, or the Northeast, where it covers also electric transmission, because there's a lot of interconnection between Canada and the United States and in the Northeast. So we want to set that in law, and that's one of the bills the House also passed. So, but I'm glad to be here again. I work every day on some of the issues that y'all work on to make sure you hire a lot of my constituents, and I appreciate the relationship we have over the years. And thank you again. And Chad, thank you and the Port Region for doing this every year.
Well, he stole all my thunder, so ditto what he said. Thank you all very much. Yeah, listen, it's great to be here, and I believe in crowd participation, so I want to get y'all kind of geared up and ready. If you're here, raise your hand. Okay, most of y'all are here. Chad, I appreciate the invite. Glad to see that Karen Gregory is on your team. Ladies, let me just tell you, they finally discovered something that does the work of 3 men, a woman. So that's a good thing when you've got that kind of firepower. Well, and there we go. That's the wife of a man there that's clapping. Mayor, that's a great statement you made. 110,000 new jobs in Pasadena, Petrochemical industry, to be chemically dependent. That's a good thing here, isn't it? I mean, isn't that good, Michael, to be chemically dependent? Well, listen, I appreciate the chance to talk. I'll share a quick story with you. This is about Outlook Conference. Many of y'all remember the days before caller ID. How many of y'all remember the psychic hotline? Come on. I got y'all greased up where you can raise your hands. They work. Some of y'all have called it, and your MasterCard bill proves it, but you don't want to admit it. Well, anyway, Mr. Frog was wondering about his Outlook on Thursday. He called the psychic hotline. He said, "This is Mr. Frog. I'm wanting to see how next Thursday looks." And the lady says, Thursday. Well, let me see here, Mr. Frog. According to this, you come face to face with a beautiful princess. And he says, "Beautiful princess? Will she kiss me into nice, handsome prince? Will it be a romantic setting?" And she says, "No, according to this, it's biology 101. Some of y'all will catch that later. Fortunately, our outlook is a lot better. Congressman Green's exactly correct. I have 5 ports, more than any other member of Congress. Some of the other members have 4 ports, but I have 5 ports. So if you don't think the petrochemical industry is important to me, my goodness, I've got Beaumont, Port Arthur, I've got Freeport, Port of Freeport, Galveston, and Texas City. How many of y'all have been following the deepening and what the improvements on the Panama Canal? Y'all watching that? How many of y'all would like for the Gulf Coast of Texas to be the gateway to America? That's why we're here, isn't it? So we're working on that for you guys in Congress, believe it or not. Ports are very, very important to us. And I will tell you that energy for us in our area is so darned important. Many of you will probably know that Texas and North Dakota, the two states alone, those two states provide 49% of the nation's oil. 32% from Texas and 17% from North Dakota. Can you say energy and jobs? There's no wonder it's 110,000 jobs and all of the development along the Sabine-Neches waterway, along this ship channel, along over in Freeport. And by the way, I've got Galveston Bay. So everything that comes into the Houston port comes through my district. So trying to figure out how I can get a toll booth out there so we can participate in that. Energy, very, very important. And Gene, you stole my thunder about the Bluebell Creamery in Brenham. They eat all they can and they sell the rest. But I will tell you this, that ice cream tastes a lot better than that crude oil, just so you know. That's what I believe we should be doing with our energy policy, folks. We should be using everything we can. We should be building up our strategic petroleum reserves. We ought to be taking advantage of this fracking, which how many of y'all know started in my district by George Mitchell? Okay, you bet. So energy is extremely important to us. It is our future. It is what's going to make this country go. It's how to get us out of this, what I call the jobless recovery. Energy is a good thing. What I tell people is that the things that make America great are the things that America makes. Now, how do we do that? We have a stable, reliable, affordable, dependable energy supply, as long as we can keep the EPA out of the way. Did I say that out loud? So we have a stable, reliable, affordable, dependable energy supply. How many of y'all believe that the Ukrainians would rather be buying natural gas from us than the Russian nut job? I mean, rocket science it ain't. Although I am on the science committee. Did you tell them that, Charles? So we need to be selling every bit of energy we can. These are jobs. This is a time when I would argue that not only does it mean economic stability and security, folks, it means national security. And Stephen, I would go one further than that and say it means international security. Because when you have a strong, safe America, you have a safe world. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? I probably said this last year, but I'll remind us. When the world has a catastrophe, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a famine, whether it's a war, whether it's a tsunami, no matter what it is, when the world has a catastrophe and they dial 911, who answers? We do. Isn't that true? The United States of America with our military? And so for the world to be safe, we must have a strong America. And energy is that key. That's what's going to make this country energy independent, and we're going to lead the world in energy, and it's going to help America continue to be that economic powerhouse. Keystone Pipeline, Congressman Green alluded to it. It has been, gosh, how many days? Not that I'm counting, 2,166. It comes into my district over Port Arthur, Nederland. Keystone Pipeline does. Now, let me put that in perspective. The permit was applied for, the paperwork was submitted September the 19th, 2008. And if memory serves me correct, that was before the introduction of the iPad. That's sobering. That's a long time ago. On September the 19th, that was 5.93 years ago. Gene's right. Too much politics involved. I was glad to support the bill to get it out of the House. Lee Terry of Nebraska had a bill that actually took the permitting process off the White House, out of the White House, and made it where we could get that bill passed. And my First Amendment passed that said we incorporated the State Department's language in that said little if any environmental impact and a good economic impact. So we're still waiting on the approval of the Keystone Pipeline. I'm a Republican, of course. I actually had that conversation with the President. Barack Obama, introduced myself to him, said, we want the Keystone Pipeline. He said, well, Randy, with all due respect, all they're going to do is send that oil overseas. I said, Mr. President, with all due respect to you, to which companies would you say that you don't want them exporting their product? Would you tell that to Apple, Nike, Toyota. And my chief of staff said, you should have said Ford. All right, Ford. But Toyota builds trucks where? San Antonio, okay? So he said, well, Randy, we hope to have a decision within 3 weeks. Now, that was back in March of 2013. So we're pushing for the energy that we know creates those jobs the mayor was talking about. We're pushing for being able to export crude. Gene's exactly correct. A national gas, I would say natural gas, a national renaissance, energy renaissance, because we're going to be able to do so many things and be the world's leader. And I could go on and on and on. We've been working to kind of, lack of a better word, neutralize the EPA. Some of you know the EPA is working on new regulations. Dr. Shaw, I know you know that. And if they come out with new ozone regulations, 80% of the country is immediately in non-attainment. Of course, I'm on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We had the EPA up there on their advisory council. They wanted to appoint new members, and I encouraged them to get business people from the area, and she said, no, they just want government employees because business people would have a conflict of interest, and that just got all over me. I said, conflict of interest? You know, I own an air conditioning company, 33 years, Weber's Air and Heat. The number is 281-485. Got all over me when Dr. Sevka said that. I said, you're telling me that business people in those communities that built a business there, live and work there, play there, their kids there, go to school there, see their customers in the grocery store, the ball field, schools, whatever. And if you've done a good job building a business, the people of the community will reward you by buying your product or service and keeping you in business. And so you tell me they have a conflict of interest to be on an advisory panel for the EPA? I said, oh, that just gets all over me. I said, but I forget, when it comes to the EPA and non-attainment and common sense, they're a non-attainment of common sense. My colleague to the right said, Randy, I don't think you can count on a Christmas card from her come December. But we're working to rein in some of those regulators who are killing jobs. What some of the legislative agenda that couldn't be pushed through Congress is now we see being pushed through the regulatory agencies, EPA, DOE, IRS, God forbid, and I can go right down the list. Gene's right, we've passed a lot of bills, about 6 appropriation bills over to the Senate. Of course, we like to say the Senate is where all good bills go to die. But we're working on your behalf, trying to make sure that the regulations are fair, that we have a good, stable, and a good energy policy to continue to build this great country. You guys and gals know that. That's why you're here. You help. You are the salt of the earth. You are the backbone of the community. I like to tell people, John, that America is supposed to be a country that has a government, not a government that has a country. And how many of y'all heard, I'll finish with this, how many of y'all heard, show of hands, this following statement? Government's job is to create an environment where business can thrive. How many of y'all have heard that? That is absolutely wrong. Government's job is not to create an environment where business can thrive. Government's job is to keep from creating an environment where business can't thrive. Because the business owners, the entrepreneurs, and the salt of the earth people like y'all that care about your community and know what it takes to make a go of it, you'll make this work. You'll create jobs, you'll create wealth, and you'll keep this country on the great path that it's supposed to be. God bless you. Thank you very much.
You know what? There's a few minutes left, and if any of you have any questions of our esteemed panel here, Congressman Green and Congressman Weber, we welcome those questions from the floor. Show of hands. Stand, please, and ask your question. Anybody want to know how they got here today, or? Yeah, really. What's for lunch? What's going to be coming up that's going to impact your particular industry? Any questions? There's one now. What's the possibility of the Jones Act actually going away?
Well, I would hope not. I represent a lot of maritime folks in East Harris County who made a living and supported families on those U.S. flag ships. So, I'm not a part of trying to eliminate the Jones Act.
I'm not aware of, are you, Gene, of a bill that's got any kind of bill that's got any kind of traction that would make that happen. So in answer to your question, the possibility is probably very low.
How about the next question from the audience? Please stand, sir, would you, so we can hear? Thank you.
My background is aerospace, JSC. Any way to do legislation for the aerospace industry, like you're trying to do with pipeline regulations, keep it out of politics? We have a long-term plan.
How much time do you have? Repeat his question, will you, Charles?
Yeah, aerospace, I heard that part.
Well, his question, his question was, is there a possibility of doing legislation on the aerospace industry to keep the politics out of it, like we're trying to do on the pipeline industry? No. So, no, I don't know if that's the case or not. And I'm sorry, tell me your name. Richard, I don't know if that's the case or not. Johnson Space Center is about 2 miles north of my district. I have 7,500 people that live in my district that work there, but actually it's in Congressional District 36. That's not a move afoot. Perhaps that's something that we would want to look at, depending upon, because I believe that NASA needs to be well funded and a priority, and needs to have some stabilization so that they can have a plan going forward and not every 2 or 4 years. I've already mentioned that America needs to be a great, strong superpower because it makes for a safe world. Any of the military people in the room, or a lot of us would recognize that in a military situation, whoever occupies the high ground has the upper hand. There is no more ultimate high ground than space. And so not only does it help us militarily with national security, but it helps with innovation, helps us be on that cutting edge. It helps with STEM, with the kids coming up, it inspires. So perhaps if we're successful with the pipeline industry, it would be something that we could look at. Unfortunately, it has been a political football as well.
All right, there's a very large guy standing over here with a hook looking at me, so...
Let me just respond.
Go ahead, sir.
We've had problems with having always supported Johnson Space Center and aerospace. Starting about 8 years ago, there's been a battle within, at the national level, about private sector. We're seeing a success with SpaceX and lots of the other companies. The federal government has been funding those programs from these independent companies. And frankly, I think shortchanging NASA. And that's been one of our problems. And, you know, it hurts me to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the U.S. astronaut up on a Russian Soyuz with what's going on in Russia now. So, you know, it's a bad decision, but we're still trying to get out from that. You know, we've had payloads go up by the private sector. We need to have a heavy lift rocket. Every day we hear good news that we will actually have a heavy lift rocket that can put something up there, either to the space station or ultimately beyond. But we really need a plan for NASA because it's been torn. Because do you want NASA doing it, contracting with Boeing and Lockheed and all these folks, or do you want a separate entity of a company like a SpaceX, independent company, because they're getting federal money to do what NASA used to do?
Richard, you must have been with these guys or something. I don't know. That was a heck of a question. I appreciate it very much. Look, I want to introduce Roger Blackburn from Infinity Group, and then I'll be back to the podium to continue.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
Oh, one minute, he said. 1 minute.
Okay. I stand here today to express our appreciation for our guest panelists, our speakers today, and to do our best to let them know our deep appreciation for them being here and speaking to us today. Would you give them a hand, please? Thank you so much. Great job. The ownership of Infinity is pleased to be able to present our speakers with a gift today of appreciation. We are a full-service provider, a contractor that works very hard within this area, doing our best to promote things such as this event here, to make sure that we're building a stronger economy for every individual within this area. The greatest privilege that we have is to be able to be part of a great country, a great government that wants to stay out of the way to allow us that privilege. And I think you heard these gentlemen speaking of that today. With that in mind, we can truly make a difference within our world. At Infinity, we have several groups of company that makes up our one individual umbrella group. We have Brazos M&E, which is a civil construction group that does remediation, civil site work, and all the preparation to build the plants for the future itself. We also have Infinity Construction Services that are able to build it from the ground up, put things in perspective, and make things happen. We also have an Infinity group called the UEI Group, which handles all electrical instrumentation, every need that you could possibly have. So we're a group reaching out to do something not only as an industry provider, but to provide the world with successful places in the future. So we wanted to express our sincere thanks for our speakers today and let them know that we appreciate them and everything they are doing for us. Do you believe that this morning? They're doing it to make a difference in our life. It's time we stand together. Let's make something happen good for our world and for our area. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.